I'm Nicholas Crocitto, divorce mediator, and I'm delighted today to have my colleague and member of the New York State Council on Divorce Mediation, Alayne Katz, with me today, in which we will be having a free-flowing conversation about all things mediation, how we got here, what drew us to it, and how wonderful it is, what it does for families, and on and on. Alayne Katz is here today visiting me in my home and in this studio/office. And she's got incredible pearls of wisdom about the act of mediation, why it helps families, and how, being a seasoned litigator for years, she can see the difference between litigation and mediation in a way that many other people can't. So I think I'd actually like to start with that, Alayne. And can you give me just a little background about your litigations and what was the nature of those litigations?
Well, I got into family law in the late 80s, representing children in abuse and neglect and in custody matters. That segued into representing adults as well. And I saw how detrimental a custody litigation is on children.
Right.
And I knew there was a better way, and I found my way to mediation. And mediation was a way of helping a family to move from together to apart, from married parents to co-parents. You don't divorce when you have two children. You have children. You are always their parents, and I thought it was very important for children to have that solid foundation. If you litigate, all you do is tear each other apart. And it is very hard at the end of that, when your gladiators are gone, it is very hard to talk respectfully to one another and respect each other. And when children see parents that don't respect each other and they see themselves in their parents, they feel that lack of love and respect for who they are as people.
I agree, absolutely. I'm going to share a couple of phrases that I've used with clients, my mediation clients, and see if this resonates. I suspect it will. I numerous times have corrected people in the way that they were speaking about time with the kids, even if they were ready to use the term co-parenting. And they would say, well, on Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, that's my time with the kids. And I say, let's look at that a different way. Wednesday, Thursdays, and Friday, those days are when your kid has time with you. And I direct that comment at both parents so that they begin to grasp the fact that they're really important in the lives of those children. Now, the marriage didn't work out. I also like to say that the family's not coming apart, but it's reorganizing. But that the most perverse thing that a kid could see would be to have one person that they love hurt another person that they love. And really, it's probably the tip of the iceberg. I want to hear some more from you about things you've seen and witnessed in litigations. But that is so damaging to a child. And I don't care if the kid is 6 or 19. It's still a perverse thing for them to see.
6, 19, or 26.
Or 26, yeah.
Adult children are harmed by divorce almost as much as younger children. They feel that the life they had was a lie. They feel that their parents' marriage was a lie. I think at any age, children are harmed. I think one of the things that I was most surprised about, when parents are getting along, you can transfer a child between them with feelings of calmness. The transfer of children between litigating parents, I liken to crossing enemy lines as prisoners of war.
Wow.
That is how my children clients felt.
Yeah.
Their parents were enemies, and they were really like prisoners.
Yeah.
when they entered the other parent's home, they were questioned, and they were questioned because they wanted to have data and evidence for the litigation.
Being a prisoner of war, being transferred across enemy lines. I love that. I'm going to use that myself. Being a prisoner of war and being transferred or handed off, across enemy lines.
Children,
Yeah.
it's not an exaggeration. And I have done role plays where I have been asked to play a child and transfer between parents. And then I've transferred with a mental health professional helping me to transfer. And this is a role play. This is not real life. I was an adult and I was a divorce lawyer at the time. And I felt tension when I didn't have a mental health professional helping with the transfer between angry people who were just actors acting angry. They weren't real litigating parents.
Right. They weren't your parents either.
They weren't my parents.
And still you could feel it.
I was an adult and I could feel the tension. So I got into family law because of children.
Yeah.
And there was no doubt that litigation was terrible for them. When a parent won, they were just waiting for round two. There was always going to be the next round of litigation, so the loser could prove that the judge was wrong. It never ended. Yeah. Children's childhood was only about the fight between their parents. And how could they be a good person if their parents hated each other and they were like their parents?
Right.
It's so diminished their self-esteem. The thing that we as parents say is most important to what we want to instill in our children, self-esteem. Litigated, contentious divorces rob children of their self-esteem.
Well, so spot on, so spot on. And I can speak to that, having been a child of divorce. And I wasn't quite a child. I was 16, 17, 18, kind of living through that chapter. I wouldn't have phrased it that way then, but as I said earlier, it was a perverse thing to see two people that I loved, which, to your point, I also, again, beyond words, but it was there. I knew myself to be half of each of my parents. And here's this, and now I'm being sort of split in two also. Well, yeah, everything you're saying.
The split in two is an interesting comment. I have had, when I only represented children, a recurring nightmare. I would be walking down the street and I would be slipping. And I looked down and I was slipping in blood. And I looked up and there was a nice 3 people walking in front of me, a mom and a dad, holding the hands of their child, except they had split their child in half, and I was slipping in the blood of the child that they were literally splitting in half.
Jeez.
That is how I felt about litigations, and we speak about parents wanting as much time as possible. It's the child's time. It's the child's life.
Yes.
One of my 16-year-old boys early in my career said to me, "Do I get a weekend? I want a weekend where neither of my parents feel that if I make plans to see my friends, I am disappointing them because it's their weekend."
Wow. That's exactly the kind of insight that I was hoping would come out, and that's remarkable. I mean, think about what that's saying. That is a message, in a sense, to our whole society of like, look what we're doing to our kids. As I mentioned earlier, what drew me to mediation, having been a child of divorce, was exactly that. I mean, there are divorces that happen where there are no children. I've mediated those kinds of cases, and it's such a different game. It's such a different unfolding. It's still a divorce, but the children of a divorcing couple, they're carrying forward the way that their parents have acted.
Absolutely.
I also tell my divorcing spouses, look, if you can behave with dignity, and we do this in a way that's civil and respectful, all the research is there, your children will thrive. To the degree that there's conflict between the two of you, the children will struggle and be damaged by it, right?
And that is so true insofar as even people who stay together and don't divorce, if there's conflict in a marriage, it's damaging to the development of children. You know, we talk about mediation is better than litigation, but there's more to what's better about mediation than how bad litigation is.
Yes.
Mediation can be a transformative process. The mediator can help people who understandably have lost sight on how to speak civilly to one another, can learn during a mediation how to problem solve together as they problem solve their divorce. And they are going to, maybe with their house and property, maybe with their children, they are going to continue to some extent, greater with children, to problem solve. And mediation gives them the opportunity to learn how to speak respectfully, how to have a different paradigm of communication. Litigation only teaches you how to be interviewed by your lawyer, so your lawyer can draft papers saying the worst thing possible that is still colorably true about your spouse. Mediation teaches you a better way of communicating and problem solving that will help you throughout your child's life, not just when they're minors. I've also spoken to my mediation clients and even my litigation clients. Fight hard now for who gets, the most time with the children. Guess what? 16, 18 years old, when they're really fun to be with, 20, 25, 30. I have children that are 29 and 34. Make it miserable for them now. You will not have the good times with them in the future. They won't want to be with you.
Right.
And they won't want to be with you when it's the best of time in their lives.
Yes, that's so true. I experienced that myself in my life, and I had to kind of work against that current. And I think I was lucky, and my parents were lucky too, that I kind of saw that. I also had numerous friends around me whose parents were getting divorced, who had way more toxic ways of engaging with their parents. I loved both of my parents a lot. And I was somehow able to use what was going on with my friends in some way as a bit of a guide as what some of the things not to do. And I was patient with them, and I was pretty torn up about it.
Sure, it was
but
hard.
that current was pulling me there. Like, I don't want to deal with, I don't want to deal with them. I never thought of asking for a weekend for myself, visitation
A weekend where
with
you
myself.
didn't have a responsibility to one of your parents who were treating you like a doll that they both didn't want to share.
Yeah.
People sometimes say, why mediation? Well, first of all, what is mediation? Everyone seems to think they know what a lawyer is.
Yeah, let's get into
But
that.
when clients ask me, what is a mediator, I always say it is an informed, creative referee. Informed about the things you need to decide in order to end your marriage. Creative, spent many years helping people to do this and have a lot of good options and ideas on how to solve the problems that people need to solve in divorce, which are really very simple. Schedule for your children, decision making for your children, separate your assets and liabilities, deal with support for a dependent spouse or dependent children. That's it. It's really not that complicated. And last part is the referee. I'm there to help the two of you communicate in a more successful way and not let it devolve into conflict. It's
Yes.
not that it's not that complicated, and it's a better structure
Yeah.
than two attorneys arguing with one another.
I couldn't agree more. Some of the things that I've told my clients at the start was simply, look, Marriage is a legal instrument that has to be undone legally, but that has led us down this road. I love attorneys. We'd be in big trouble without attorneys. They have an ethical obligation to fight for their client 100%, and there's a place for that. When you look at it alongside mediation, you might quickly come to the conclusion that this may not be the right tool for the job with these young lives sort of dangling in the balance, and that there's a better way forward.
Sure. Litigation is for AT&T versus Ma Bell, not for mom versus dad.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you hear the word discovery. People live together. They don't have to discover the credit cards. They got them every month. Discovery and versus, plaintiff versus defendant. That's just not even a paradigm that should ever be used when you're talking about parents.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's very good that we look back and we have litigation as a point of reference, and we know kind of how it got into place. But there are many other aspects of our society that are slowly moving forward thanks to the hard work of very many people working in many different sectors. And this is one where I see our society dropping some of these old ideas and saying, wait a minute, many people even know people who have mediated and settled out of court, established the terms of their divorce with a mediator, and just sort of move through the process. Not that it's all rainbows and unicorns afterward, but their kids are okay, things are civil, they saved a lot of money and kept stress down. That's so important, especially for kids.
And when they had problems in the future, they were able to solve them as people and as parents, instead of as ex-litigants whose only problem-solving mechanism was a courtroom and lawyers.
Right, right.
Because children have problems in the future. There are step-parent problems. I hate, it's a fact of life. I'm fortunate. My stepdaughter loves me. My daughter loves my partner, but there's a lot of problems with that. Children have mental health problems. Children have surgeries. There's a lot for parents to have to deal with in the future. And if the way they terminate their marriage is through third parties and a man in a black robe making a decision, when future problems occur with their children, it's very hard to solve those problems in a rational, peaceful process.
Yeah, and wouldn't you also say that the way, you've heard the expression, the way you do anything is the way you'll do everything. And I've had to tell clients when emotions start to accelerate, at the mediation table, like, remember, this is a moment to remember your children. And imagine, if you will, that they're watching you. If they could look back on what you do now, maybe in 3 years, maybe in 10 years, and they're able to say, wow, mom or dad, you were in such a tough situation, but you kept your balance, you kept me in mind, and you acted with dignity toward this other person who I love. Kudos to you. That's such a powerful example to young people. It's sort of beyond words.
Sure.
One of my favorite ones is that kids have never been good listeners, but they've always been excellent imitators.
And a thing that I have also said to my clients, I understand that children's brains are little video recorders, and all day long you're the star of the show. And then when they go to sleep, they do reruns. And if the show is one of conflict and animosity, then that's what you've taught them.
Yes. Yeah, well put. Great.
So
when people come into your office, what can they expect? What is your mediation process like? Can you give me the basics of what you do, how you do it, and maybe why you do it?
So people don't always come into my office. One of the best things about COVID is we learned to work virtually, and I have found that virtual mediation is often better for people than in my office. I do both, but I find that my clients are happier when they're not in the same room with each other. So most of my mediations are virtual, although I'm happy to do it in the office. Mediations are generally, 90 minutes to 2 hour sessions, I find, is the sweet spot of the mediation session. A common misconception is you can only mediate if you agree. If people are completely in agreement and they know exactly what they want, they don't need a mediator. All they need is a scribe. They need someone to write their agreement. Mediation is the process by which a mediator sits with you and goes through the things you need to decide in order to get divorced. And we might start with what are your assets and liabilities, and talking about how to divide those assets and liabilities. People think that there's not disclosure in mediation. That is not true. There is sharing of information during mediation, and as much information as I think the parties need. People think in mediation that there's no valuation of assets. That's not true. If there's a pension, I value it. If there's a business, I value it. You're not getting a process that doesn't give you the full meeting of your needs with respect to your children and your property. You're just getting it with one mediator sitting with the two parties who are able to talk about what they want and how they want to terminate their marriage, as opposed to sitting with a judge, as one of my clients likes to say, an old white guy in a black dress, telling us what to do based on what a bunch of old white men and women in Albany decided the rules were. And a lot of those rules are wrong, better known as the domestic relations law. There's mistakes in them. There's problems with it. That they're not always the best rules.
And does mediation help you navigate those trouble spots and come up with more creative solutions that kind of address those little, I won't call them loopholes, but those little trouble spots?
Well, the advantage of one of the many advantages of mediation is that the parties chart their own course. I always say, you come up with an idea and I can draft anything. Whatever you can think of, I can draft. And I can probably think of 10 more things than you can. I was on a mediation the other day and they said, what can we do about this? And I rattled off 3 things and I said, should I keep going? And we were talking about a house with a 2.6% mortgage, keeping the mortgage even though the wife was going to buy the husband out of the house, and what were the different ways we could protect him, because his name was going to stay on the mortgage. Who in their right mind would get rid of a 2.6% mortgage in this environment?
Exactly.
So mediation gives full breadth to what people want their future life to look like, instead of what a judge did last week and it's easy and convenient for him or her. As I said, whatever they can think of, I can write. And you don't have to agree. You're not agreeing. This common misconception that you can only mediate if, you really agree. Not at all. People come into my office or into my Zoom room, and they don't agree at all. They don't agree on a schedule for their children. They don't agree on what's going to happen to the house. They don't agree on what the buyout on the house should be. They don't agree on what the value of the house is. It's not but they come to an agreement because that's what they want to do. And as a mediator who's been doing this now for 37 years, I have a lot of good creative ideas on how to solve a problem.
Right.
Quite frankly, a lot more than your average judge. They haven't been doing it as long as I have.
It's also not quite what they're being asked to do. They're asked, in a sense, to judge things. What mediators do, particularly by your description, is to generate some ideas, sort of get the ball rolling in a certain direction. Like, no, we're going to collaborate on whatever the answer to this question is. We're going to work together and arrive at it. And you're coming up with creative solutions to problems.
Another thing people always ask me is, how long is it going to take? And I'm honest with them. I always say, I don't know.
Yeah.
What I do know is it is the emotions that drive how much time. Not generally complexity, not the presence of children. It is how emotionally ready both parties are to move forward and end their marriage.
Yeah.
And if you're not ready, it takes longer.
We've covered some really great misconceptions, things that people come into the virtual meeting room or the actual meeting room with wrong ideas. What are some of the wrong ideas that you've encountered that have really had to been uprooted before things could move forward in mediation? Maybe we've covered them all. I have one I can share,
Okay.
which is that I've had people, even during a consultation, indicating in some way that they feel like they have to show up with the answers to all the questions. And I say, no, that's my job. I know what questions to ask you, that then between the two of you, we can work on ways of answering those questions. But you're under no obligation to show up having figured it all out. That's what we do here.
So I'm going to do a quick redo.
Yeah.
A common misconception is that you have to be in agreement to mediate. People don't have to be in agreement. They come with all of the problems, all of the disagreements, and the mediator comes up with creative solutions to the problems. And we talk about their interests, and we talk about what's important to them. Another common misconception is that we're not going to really look at any of the facts. It's going to be quick. And that's not true. We look at their finances, we look at documents, we look at statements, we value assets, we value businesses, we value pensions. You're not getting a lesser product, you're just getting an alternative dispute resolution. You're working with one person together and for a common goal, instead of two lawyers that are gladiators working against one another. The beginning of my discussion about mediation with clients is one party calls me, and I spend generally about 20 minutes on the phone, and then I say, okay, have your spouse call me. This will be the last time the two of you speak to me individually. And I give the other person the same amount of time, and I say, if you feel that you could work with me, great. And if you don't feel like you can work with me, or your other spouse has decided they'd like someone else, call me back. I'll give you three names of people who have a different approach than I do. Happy to refer you to other people. But I think people tend to go to my website, and my website now has reading material and forms. It has a picture of me. It has my bio, but it doesn't present me. It doesn't, and I think having something where I am, they're seeing my talking head.
Right.
Might give them a better idea of whether or not they want to work with me.
I like that idea. You've probably been in this situation. I know I have. One spouse contacts me. That's usually the spouse that's ready to make a move. The other spouse may or may not contact me, but somehow I get the message, or even if I do get to speak to the other spouse, that there's this slight feeling, even though I go through the whole thing about being a third party neutral, blah blah blah, where they feel like that first person like has like an in with me or something. So getting your talking head, as you put it, on the site, I think is a really good idea, because they know you. It allows for that sort of exploration of, do I resonate with this person? And that seems to be very important in mediation. And I love your tactic about saying, call me back and I'll refer you to other people, because at least you keep it live. And I've had people go through that process and I never hear from them again. And you wonder, did they not like me? Or was it just like not a good fit? Or are they imploding and litigating? Who knows?
And I find that I talk to people for months and or years. The people that hired me on Friday, and I haven't even seen them, they just literally, they Zelled me money, because, well, they Zelled me money. And she's the one who called me 6 months ago. he followed up with an email to me with a different last name, so I didn't even know who he was. But then I noticed the email CC'd her, and luckily her email clicked for me, and that's how I figured out how he found me. But I think listen, it's always going to be one person that calls you. Now, you could start off with, as soon as they call you, forcing them to come into your office collectively and meet you. I don't do that because I'm not sure I even want to work with them.
Right.
So I give everyone a free somewhere between 20 and 40-minute consultation, so to speak, when I get on the phone with them, explaining divorce and explaining mediation and collaborative law and litigation, explaining to them all of the processes. And I always tell people, you can't pick the process picks you. Your facts and your personality and your spouse's personality is going to determine the method of divorce that's right for you. This is not a grocery store. You don't get to say, I want the easy and expensive uncontested divorce on the second shelf.
Well, Alayne, it's always a delight to speak to you. I know I got a ton of great ideas from you, ways of engaging with this incredible process, mediation. And for all our viewers and listeners, please visit AlayneKatzLaw.com, and that's spelled ALAYNE, Katz, Katz, law.com, AlayneKatzLaw.com. Lots of great information there and a way to get in touch with this incredible mediator.
Nicholas, thank you so much. You've made this an easy and a very pleasant experience, and I really appreciate it.
See you soon.
Namaste.